Hi, Andrew here. And sometimes you just got to remember to do it for you. I've used a few pixels, used a few electrons of late, talking about why, my motivations for getting myself back in shape. At this point, we're now well into August, and I started my daily exercise, I think, back in March. So we're talking about certainly north of 4, probably up to 5 months of daily exercise. Not necessarily daily hard exercise, but something every day. At the minimum, a couple mile walk, 2-3 kilometer walk. Maybe not terribly fast, mostly pretty hard, but something. And I talked about lowering my heart rate, and I talked about being fit and healthy for the kids, and I talked about my sleep, and I can't remember all the topics I talked about. But a lot of it really focused heavily on staying fit and healthy for my boys and for my wife, for my family. But it's not all about them. I talked about being able to keep going with my youngest because he's a little Energizer bunny and he just go. He never stops, goes and goes and goes. And there are days when I just got to keep up to him. His best friend is a little version of him. They're very, very close in age, like weeks apart. Their mother's ethnicities are the same. Their daddy's ethnicities are the same. They look so similar that they're classmates, that their teachers are constantly mixing them up, calling them by each other's names. Well, this best friend, his mother and I were chatting one day, and she said that the teachers were thinking about and wanted to get him tested for ADHD. He's a little bundle of energy and constant motion and so on and so on. Sounds a lot like what I'm describing about my boy. Well, the short version of the story is one day after school, they decided to play in the park. In the park, they decided they were going to have a sleepover at the sleep. And then they had the sleepover, and the next day they were playing outside and just going constantly. Well, the friend's big sister had a soccer thing to go to, or gymnastics or something. I don't remember. They had a thing they had to go to, so they dropped my little fella off. 5 minutes later, he's saying, "Daddy, can I have a play date this afternoon with?" And same best friend. And I laughed, and I texted his mom to say this, and she said, "Yeah, said best friend, 5-10 minutes into the trip to take sister to her event, was saying the same thing." I said, "No problem. When you get back, let me know." Well, they're off doing this. And my little guy goes and takes his brothers to the park. Now, his brothers are 3 and 6 years older than he is, and he runs them completely out of energy. And he asks me, "Have you heard from his mom?" "No, Max," so I text. Turns out his best friend, his hyper crazy best friend, is worn out from my little guy and crashed. He's worn out his brothers. So I go out and play an hour of road hockey with him. And we're coming into the evening and he's still going. This is what I have to keep up to. Or no, I don't have to. This is what I choose to keep up to. And that's where when I told you we were in Quebec and we were at the waterfall, and he's running up the stairs and he's leaving his teenage brother in the dust, and I have to pull him back to make sure that we don't get separated in this provincial park or whatever it is, 500 miles from home. We get to the top and he just keeps on going. Big brother crashes in the car and he just starts running around in the maze. And this is what I tell you I'm trying to keep up to. And I am, generally. I mean, I'm not running the whole time, but I'm keeping up. And this is a big motivation to be able to keep up to them. And I talked about that a lot. Well, there's another motivation. and it's a personal motivation. At the end of our week's vacation, my sister-in-law had come up to visit and went with us on the trip to Quebec. Come up to visit means she lives in Toronto. We live an hour's bus ride outside of there. And she came up to visit, and she's hung out, and okay, she's got to go back. And so my wife, her sister, and their parents decided that they would go into Toronto and make a weekend of it. They'd overnight. They didn't even bother to ask me if I was going to go. Because, yeah, no. Toronto, going to the island, the city center island of Toronto, on the Saturday, Sunday of a long weekend during Carabana, the big Caribbean festival. Yeah, no. Andrew ain't playing. Homie, don't play that. I wasn't going for that. And they didn't ask. But that was what they went off to do. What I did was I went kayaking. Now, I do this whenever. I go out every weekend. I go out for an hour or 2 hours, and I paddle and I fish, and I have a very nice time. What did I do on that long weekend? Sunday. I dropped my kayak in the water at 12:30, and I paddled downstream for 2.5 hours. I said, you don't need to know the times. I paddled downstream. I said, when I get to a certain time limit, I will turn around and I will come back. And the long story short version is, I spent upwards of 7 hours paddling up and down the river. Well, I guess it was technically down and up. And there was more to it than that, because we're in high summer and the river is low. Downstream wasn't a problem, but there were a lot of little riffles and rapids where there was about that much water, just enough for me to float downstream, but there's absolutely no bloody way you're going to paddle upstream. So several times I had to get out of the kayak and slog through ankle to shin deep water that was moving at a fair pace and pull it all upstream to get to the next place and to continue paddling. And paddling upstream, of course, you're fighting the current. There's a lot more effort. But, again, getting back in shape for me so I could go out and enjoy my fishing spots and have a nice paddle and possibly have a float on the river and enjoy a nice cigar, I might have done all of that. And I was able to do all of that because I've got myself back in the shape where I can go out and do that and know there's not going to be any issue. So I paddled from lunch till dinner time for sure, almost encroaching on sunset, without ever having any concern that I was in any sort of risk or danger, because I hadn't got back to the car. And I had a wonderful time. Plus, talking about recovery, Monday, I was a bit tired. Muscles certainly, especially in here and in the back. Paddling is a whole body exercise. But the muscles knew they'd been used, but I wasn't wiped. I wasn't laid out as if from going too hard, too long, what have you. And getting back into shape the way I have been has allowed me to do that. It's allowing me to pursue those hobbies and pleasure activities that require the expenditure of energy at the levels I want to, without a limiting factor saying, you can't do this. No, that's a story I was going to tell you a story about a fella I met, but that's a story for another day. So, instead of that, I will simply say, thank you very much for watching. That was my time. Now it's your time. And in the meantime, take care, and you'll see me soon.